Man, I'm gonna get emotional. It's in being able to have this conversation, it, like I said on the phone, it really brings back, like a reverence for my journey. And while I do this to be of service, it's like, man, it's like what? Like it helps me come back and remember, as there's a lot of in this moment turmoil and chaos in different aspects of my life. Like this just helps me find that place of peace again and just like faith of like, oh yeah, oh, wow. And so just forever grateful, man, to go through that.
The Wild Tameless is about expanding our sphere of awareness into greater fields of consciousness. Our guests share their wisdom found from branching out into the unseen realms through alternative philosophy and mystical experiences. We focus on the soul component of the human experience and also touch on mind, body, and heart as we introduce pragmatic practices to create a meaningful and fulfilling life. We touch on modalities of health, ceremony, and ritual to help people harmonize their own energy and open up to the magic around them. The Wild Tameless is nature. It's the human spirit. It's music, art, and creation itself. This podcast is about helping people open to the great mystery so that we can collectively remember our place in the web of life and reorient our way forward for generations to come. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Kyle Dow. What's up, everyone? Welcome to this episode of The Wild Tameless. Today I am hosting my brother, Ronnie Martinez. And that little intro clip was actually something that took place after we officially cut the conversation. And the reason why I decided to keep that part in or utilize that segment is because it really demonstrates the heart of this man. He is really expressing gratitude for our shared experience and also gratitude for the path that he's on. And that's something that we really dive deep on in this episode is the ways of the Red Road, which is the First Nation tradition and also the different ceremonies that are held within that context. And so he found his way to the Sundance ceremony down in New Mexico. You'll have to fact check that in the conversation. And he's discussing his experience dancing around the tree and really being of service energetically in that way as people enter to this space typically to not only pray for their own wellness, but the wellness of others and really the wellness of the collective. So we dive deep into that and what his experience has been like in mine as I've been to one single Sundance and I have much to learn in that space. And I'm sure I'll be in attendance for many years to come in some capacity, whether that's supporting or dancing. Who knows? I'll let the fates decide that. And we also touch on the peyote ceremony done specifically in the Huiratka tradition. So that is a Mexican tradition. And again, this is all new to me. I'm new to this space and I really feel passionate about it. As would suggest the image of the medicine wheel behind me and the buffalo skull that is on there. And these are symbologies of this way of life. And something that I shared with Ronnie is that I have a certain amount of self awareness around this imagery that is behind me, as I am very new to this space and new to the culture as well. And it's a culture that's not mine. It belongs to the Indigenous people, the First Nations. Different cultures throughout the world use the medicine wheel in some capacity. And with that, each medicine wheel has different symbology and representation. And what I don't want to do is be misrepresenting any of these traditions. I don't want to be coming to their culture and appropriating anything. And I simply just want to be in that space to learn and to deepen my connection to the natural world and to find the wisdom keepers of earth wisdom. And I do want to be a proponent of that earth wisdom. I think it's something that we collectively have to return to, and that it's really important that we return to it so that we can shift our ways collectively as, a single species that's in right relation to all the other species and not superior, right? Not this egocentric or human centric orientation to the world, but a ecocentric orientation to the world, as we recognize everything that we're a part of, and that we do have a responsibility and we should actually be a steward of all these other species in the earth as a whole. And so the flag is behind me as a reminder to show up to those spaces in humility and to continue to be a student and to learn and try to share what's important, not just to myself, but to every human being who walks on the earth. So now that I've cleared that up, we could carry on with the episode. And I hope you get a lot out of this because I really did. It was really a pleasure. So let me know if you have any feedback or questions or further inquiries, and enjoy. All right, Ronnie, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Thank you. Doing very well, man. Thank you so much for having me on. It's very grateful to have this opportunity to connect with you like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to have you here. And so, in the intro, I gave the listeners a little bit of context for how we know each other. And a question that I like to ask my guests to kind of get us dropped into the space is, tell me a little bit about your current set and setting.
Current set and setting, I am in my apartment in beautiful Palm Desert, California. It's currently where I am operating a cannabis business and been out here since August, really enjoying it so far. It has beautiful mountains as well as palm trees and been kind of cold here, just getting through winter. So there's nice little snow caps on the mountains that we get to see. And yeah, that's really it, man. Just really in my own space, happy to be in it and happy to be in this area with such beauty in nature, right? Blue skies, beautiful mountains, and palm trees.
Heck yeah. Yeah. So, tuning into the natural beauty of the landscape, and that's something that's always present in my awareness. And so I'm in Squamish, home of the Squamish Nation, and yeah, spring is in the air as it just turned. The calendar just turned the other day as we had the equinox, and so me and some friends had a little fire ceremony, which was, yeah, really beautiful and helpful for us to recognize the transition from the winter to the spring. And so moving from that time of dreaming and darkness into what now wants to be born and rebirthed. And so that's present in my mindset. And yeah, it's a beautiful day. I'll hopefully get outside at some point and appreciate the outdoors and the natural world. And so, where to begin? I think something that we have in common right now that we're both pretty excited about is the ceremonial space. And so, as we talk about the wild tameless, it really is the thing that is beyond the normal human perception and the individual awareness of our human experience, because there is something more than just a story of who we think we are and how we think reality functions. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about how you arrived in the ceremonial space and perhaps any real significant moments that stand out in your experience.
Yeah, so many. I think with speaking of this winter into spring, not just in nature, but in my being and in my personal experience of life right now, going through some challenges, and we can take those as things that are blocking us, or we can switch our lens and look at them as initiations. And as the analogy that a lot of people like to use, lifting weights, right? We have to create the tension and the pressure in order for things to grow. And so I'm very excited to lean into and experience what is trying to bloom in my life. A lot of that stems from the work that I've been able to been lucky enough to be connected with as far as the ceremonial spaces. My journey really starts in 2019 in our Fit for Service community. All of that was very new to me. Um, I caught a podcast with Aubrey Marcus, and the way that he was talking about spirit and God and his experience of life in plant medicines, really something in me really was like, that guy's talking about something. Next came the offering for Fit for Service. I applied, was lucky enough to get accepted, and um, again, going back to connecting with you pretty much right off the bat, we were in the same compound with, I want to say, 20 other individuals in FFS. The first morning we woke up, we were both out there on the table journaling and got to really get to know each other. And that weekend and obviously that year was very impactful. And so my invitation to
Before
the ceremonial, yeah,
before you move on, I'm glad you went to our kind of like origin story as to how we met, because I was thinking as you started answering, it's like actually I want to hear about that, and so I want to hear about that moment where we met in the morning. We kind of both were in the yard of the compound and doing our own morning practice, and then somehow organically a space just was developed between us where we were able to drop in. And so I want to hear a little bit about your experience or your
yeah,
perspective of that
absolutely. What
experience.
a beautiful experience it was. And it was really the first one of the beginning of that journey where I got to sit with somebody who was authentically themselves and open and just, yeah, just that's it, right? I think so many people operate in a way of how can I be as authentic as I can be and still in a way that is accepted societally. And in that moment, it was just us two. People were walking around doing their own things as well, but it was my real first experience. And I would even go so far to say as permission to show up as my authentic self and share vulnerably. Hey, this is why I'm here. This is why I chose to say yes to this. I'm really excited about it. We got to dive into where we're from, some of the experiences that we've had, and even talk about things that we need to work on. I don't think a lot of people have the freedom, and I think it's increasing more and more. But at that time, my experience was not, hey, I can tell this person the truth of my life, and it's not going to be judged. It's going to be, oh wow, I see you, and we'll work on it together as a community. And so it was really the seed planted the seed that you planted for me to show up in that community authentically and fully myself and say, I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to show up, and being able to express myself totally um, uninhibited. Like, yeah, this is why I'm here. This is what I'm looking forward to. And that was the seed planted for me and the permission that I received from our interaction initially that allowed me to know it was a safe container to be myself.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it was completely organic and it did feel significant for me as well. And so I'm honored that you felt safe enough to just like open up, and there was an awareness inside me that kind of knew that that's what it was all about, right? Just like dropping in deeper and deeper and deeper past again, the stories and the programming that we normally operate within. And so it really set the tone for the whole year, really, in the whole experience in Fit for Service as we were there for 2 years together, 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, and as your podcast talks about the wild tameless, it couldn't have happened any other way. Just like a tree grows, however tall it's going to grow, right? However big it's going to grow, it's wild and it's tameless and it's going to be whatever it's supposed to be. And that was the first, like you said, organic coming together of that process in real time and in that moment. So, what a beautiful anchor point to be able to go back to. And this time, right, 4 years later, being able to still be connected and still feel obviously very comfortable and so much gratitude that we get to have this connection even 4 years later and to remember how it started. I think that is just a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know that we'll be connected for a long time. as will I be connected with many other members of the community, and so much gratitude for the people who put that together and the coaches. So Aubrey Marcus and Caitlin Howe and Kyle Kingsbury and Eric Godsley, and they're people that I still look to for leadership from afar, I would say, in the types of ideas they're sharing out there in the world. So yeah, much gratitude for them. And if that feels complete, you could carry on about your ceremonial introduction.
Yeah, thanks. Just, I guess one thing I'd like to say about that, something I've reflected on is I'm so grateful to have been in the first year of that gathering. They were still, figuring it out themselves, right? And so 150 people showed up of like, I don't really know what this is going to be, but we're all gonna show up to it and we're gonna say yes. And as it's grown in its impact and evolved in many ways, there's now kind of an expectation, not an expectation, but a groundwork of this is the experiences that people have had, and this is what's come through. Some of the stuff that they put in their videos is how many people have connected in businesses and partnership and in many other ways. But that first year, nobody knew, right? Nobody knew what kind of magic can be created in that. So I've thought about that a lot, that how grateful I am to have been in that inauguration, that first year, that birthing process for what it is now. Um, just to show up in that way. The coaches were still on their path, right? As we always will be. But they were just figuring it out and using the tools that they had learned to that point. And it's getting more and more refined. I know it's still having huge impacts on people based on what I'm able to see, like yourself from afar. But how grateful I am to have been in that first year to show up with, I don't know, but we're going to be here. And it feels really good. So, yeah, with that, I definitely feel complete about that expression. So, um, the ceremonial spaces, yeah. Before 2019, I was under the impression that if I took a mushroom cap, I would lose my mind and never come back. Right? That was the stigma around it. That was what people said, and in a way, it does come true. I did lose my mind, but I found myself. I lost some of my
Hmm.
mind. The mind got to be quiet after experiencing different plant medicines and being in ceremony and learning about deeper parts of myself that maybe not needed to be healed, but wanted to be healed, wanted to be seen. The things that sit in the darkness, I think, just would like to be seen and illuminated. I like to compare it to a child who feels neglected. When somebody looks at them and says, I see you, it changes everything. And I think that
Hmm.
the shadows that we carry based on our experiences in life are a similar way. They're not bad per se. They just need a little bit of attention and love. And so that's where my journey really started in 2019. That same weekend, actually, knowing that part of my programming is wanting to be somebody that people liked. I grew up playing sports, so as that is always performance based, you are accepted to the degree at which you are valuable. The better you are at the sport, the more value you create, the more connections you create. And so in that, I actually did bring some mushrooms to that weekend, even being somebody who had very little experience at that point, because I had an awareness that this group was people who have experienced that. So I brought something of value. And yeah, so many beautiful things that weekend, but that really launched me into saying yes to the plant medicine and ceremonial path. Since then, I have sat a handful of times with ayahuasca, peyote as well. Peyote's been just one of the most beautiful teachers in my life. I've been blessed to have been connected to true, deep lineage shamans in those plant medicine ceremonies, and forever will be grateful to have sat in sacred space that has hundreds, if not thousands, of years of tradition behind it. And so that's how I was introduced through the community, really, through the community, putting together ceremonies and being able to say yes to them, showing up to do my work is absolutely changed the trajectory of my life and evolved the human that I'm able to show up as today, with awareness that there is many layers to the onion, and so never will I think that it's done. But with each one and integrating those experiences, there comes more and more peace in the system and grace with it all.
Mm. Absolutely. And it's funny to hear that in 2019 you were only just opening up to psilocybin and these other medicines, because I remember sitting in that compound on one of the evenings, it might have been the last night there, where you
Yeah.
had a bag of mushrooms and you were just handing them out to people in a very like graceful and seemingly practiced way, you know? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, this guy's tuned in, you know, he's like blessing the medicine with love before he passes it on to each individual. And I remember you handed me some and I indulged, and it was a really lovely and connected evening for sure. And so as we sit in fond recollection of that evening, it's actually contrasted with the other ceremonies that you're describing, because that evening was pretty recreational, I would say, as we were sitting around a fire. And I was drinking that night, and others were as well. And I mean, that's one approach to the medicine, and something that I've done a lot of. And in my later years, I've taken it deeper into a ceremonial approach where, you know, I've sat by myself with psilocybin around a fire by a river, you know, even indoors. And then I've had psilocybin journeys facilitated by actual medicine men. Actually, I've only had that experience once, and I'll have it again coming up shortly. And as you mentioned, the peyote ceremony, that's like almost, well, it's at a different point on the spectrum of how we can experience the medicines, in the sense that it is very devotional, and you're up all night, usually focused on a fire, and are being guided by, like you said, the shaman or marakami of that particular lineage. And so why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you found that ceremony specifically and your experience within it?
Yeah. So again, through the community, there was a ceremony set up through one of our dear, beautiful sisters, Lucy, at Celeste's house, Raven's Eye in Malibu, California. I said yes, luckily, and it's funny how things work. I said it's a 2 night ceremony, typically, how this lineage provides the medicine, and with my busyness of life, I said I'll only go to one, and so yeah, I showed up, open and ready. It was my first experience. Um, no real big experiences at that point, right? More what you were talking about of kind of recreational, in a connected way. I think there's room for the deep ceremonial work, and especially now, I would say that if I had an option to go to the bar with friends or take, a macro micro dose, let's say a half a gram to a gram of psilocybin, and connect with community in that way, I think there is room for it. Um, anyways, back to the peyote ceremony. So this shaman from Mexico, the Medicambe from Mexico, came to share his medicine, and in the first night, it was, man, it was all the things. It was the first few hours I remember were really difficult. It was, we're going to do some work. And there was a lot of processing around shame and guilt that I held for actions I had taken in my life. And so there was a lot of crying, a lot of releasing. Like you mentioned, you work deeply with the fire. It's a despacho ceremony all night long. So as the shaman is curating the energies with songs that were given to his tribe many, 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 many years ago through the medicine. As he sings, it brings up whatever it's supposed to bring up. And for me, it was my shame and my guilt. And so once he kind of slows the song down, that's your time to really integrate and process. And the invitation is whatever you would like to release, you go grab a stick that they have prepared, you clean yourself with it, you say a little prayer, and you release it into the fire. And one of the beautiful experiences that I found was after essentially crawling back to my mat, um, is you can hear the fire really transmuting whatever it is that you felt called to release
Mm.
in that moment. It just, you hear it pop and you can feel it in your system that it's releasing, and it's turning into the smoke, right? It goes from something physical to smoke, and that can be carried and cleansed. And so that was the first 3 or 4 hours of that night. And then it changed to receiving so much love. It was overwhelming. I was under a wave. I felt like I couldn't move. I was just on my side in my blanket, and it felt like the medicine was like, I love you. Here, whatever you want, you can have it. You can have it. Here, it's all for you. But it was so much at once. It was hard to hold.
Mm.
All of the things I thought I wanted based on what I've seen in the community of understanding crystals and, sacred geometry and all of these things that I felt I wasn't connected to at the time. It was like, it's yours, it's yours, it's yours. I love you, I love you. And it was overwhelming. And that was probably another few hours. The final hours of that night was, and here's what it's like to be nothing, right? And not nothing, but no
Mm.
thing, not attached to our stories, not in deep desire of understanding crystals and sacred geometry, but just to be just to be you, just to be yourself. And I remember sitting on um, it's like a rock floor with a blanket over my shoulder, and I couldn't say anything. All I could do was go, because it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And I just wanted to I had so much love for the Metacambe and his right hand man and everybody in that space doing their work. There was no overwhelming feeling of grief and sadness. There was no overwhelming feeling of love. There was just absolute peace. And to watch the sunrise in that state is such a special gift. Um, and I knew right away that it was going to be a 2 night ceremony. There was no way that I could just leave and go back to work. Right? It was like, you're here, and I was like, okay. The second night was really interesting because you are up all night. I felt very energized after the ceremony, right? After releasing so much and also feeling so much love. It was difficult to sleep during the day. And so we went into the second night, and I could not get connected. I could not, I could not get to that same vein of connectedness with the medicine. It felt like it was staying away in a sense. Typically the Metacambes share a medicine story, and 3/4 through the medicine story, I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I was upset because, like, why am I not getting this? Why? Like, what is happening? And it took to finally closing the ceremony that the whisper came and was like, I gave you everything. I gave you everything, right? And ultimately, it illuminated a side of me that is that black hole, right? That thing that can never be filled. Of you can get everything and you'll still want more,
Mm.
which after integration was like, be grateful for what we have, right? Be grateful for what we receive, and be open to more when it's time. But to be aware of that idea, it's the idea of people who create great wealth and then do everything they can to continue to multiply it. Sometimes it's, no matter how much wealth that you acquire, it'll never be enough, because it's not the wealth that is the desire. The desire is to fill that hole that we have inside of ourselves, whether that's with material things, with money, with sex, with drugs. There are so many different avenues to try and fill this hole that can only be filled back by ourselves. It can only be filled by a self love. And so even in the struggle of the second night, there was still such a deep lesson. And that was the kickoff of my experience to saying yes to these journeys of like, wow, it's something I've never experienced before. It's otherworldly, but it feels so true in my body, right? There's so much resonance with the teachings that it has for us. And so from that point on, it was just an absolute yes of, when I can make it to do this work, I will show up.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing all that. Definitely some truth tingles in there. And yeah, some things that I want to highlight. This desire that you speak about for more, the hungry ghost mentality of Western society in the modern world, where we're always chasing things that are seemingly just at a grasp. And it's this mentality of, I'll be happy when, or I'll be fulfilled when. And everything is just like here. It's all here. It's always been all here. And so we could drop into the appreciation of everything we have in every single moment. And a lot of that is about acceptance. Like, this is just how it is at this moment, in recognizing the perfection of that in every moment. And sometimes, we're going to be on one side of the spectrum where we're in grief and despair and agony and fear and everything else. And to be present with that and to not deny it any more than we would the opposite side of the spectrum, which might be peace, joy, and love and bliss. Like, that's the secret, because that really is appreciating the creation in its perfection all the time. And so easier said than done. And it could happen in an instance, and then so the goal seemingly is to make that instance as consistent and long lasting as possible, right? So the idea of not coming back down off the peak of the mountain, so changing these states into traits, right? So what do we do to allow us to reside in that place of harmony, of peace and joy or love or whatever appeals to us? And it's not a quick fix. It is a practice, and it is about constantly opening it up more and more so we could allow the divine in just a little bit more, right? And at some place, we're just in it. We're in the flow of experience itself. And that place is super sacred, but no more sacred than anything else. And that's the trap again. So it's this constant paradox as we navigate the oscillations of life. And something else I want to highlight in there is the ordeal. Like, I've never done a 2-night peyote ceremony, although I've done a 1-night peyote ceremony, and it's hard. You're sitting there in discomfort, and at some point it doesn't make sense. It's like, why? Like, why am I doing this? If you're in the bliss and the magic of the ceremony, it's like, oh yeah, this is great. And then there's going to be the challenging point where it's like 4 a.m. and you want to go to sleep, and you're not. Instead, you're going to take more medicine and keep praying. And so it's like, what are we doing here? And I remember my first peyote ceremony that was done with a roadman of the Native American church. And he just kept on saying, don't worry, it will all make sense in the morning.
Mm.
And in the devotion to the ordeal and the process, it's so much more rewarding than perhaps the quick fix mentality or approach that we have in our society, right? So people are going for whatever experience, whether it's like a clinical ketamine experience or like a night of eating mushrooms and drinking beer, they expect something to change or be resolved like that. But the more you put in, the more you get out, right? And so this devotion that I've seen through the Wuratka tradition, where the Marakamis come from, and then also in the First Nation community, is really, really inspiring. And I wonder if you want to speak to any of that.
Definitely. And as you stated, truth tingles in the share. I think it comes back down to awareness. The mind is going to mind. It's what it's going to do, right? And it's going to take us in on these stories and on these journeys, and the awareness of allowance, like you said, for it to be present and say, I see you, similar to the thing that's in the darkness. I think awareness is such a huge key. And Ram Dass has been one of my just favorite teachers since beginning this process. And as I continue to grow and evolve and open myself, what he's speaking of comes more and more clear. And I think that's part of the integration. I think the plant medicine ceremonies are seeds that are planted, um, and it is our, I would go so far to say, is our responsibility to um, tend the environment. You can throw in one of the scriptures, you can throw seed, right? That's kind of the journey, is to continue to try plant seeds, and some seed will fall on rock and won't grow. Some will fall on okay soil, but it won't be tended to allow that seed to crack open and grow into whatever it's supposed to grow into. And some places will be in fertile soil and watered and in good sunlight, and that is the environment that is created for the birth of that plant. And I think the plant medicine ceremonies are not the thing that fixes it. They are seeds planted in our being, and then it's up to us to um, nurture that environment, to continue to pour water into ourselves, to continue to get sunlight. And so that lesson and that healing can actually be birthed and come out and grow. And this Widadika lineage that serves this medicine in such a sacred and profound way, they constantly anchor you throughout the ceremony to be connected with nature. There's the nature is full of lessons should we choose to get quiet enough to listen. And there are so many examples of the reverence that they hold for nature. Um, Water, right? It's literally our lifeblood. It's what we're mostly made up of, and without it, I mean, at this point, I know you can go 3, 4 days after Sundance, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But after a relatively short period of time, should we not intake any water, we're not going to be here anymore, right? And so, how aware can we be of the gifts that Mother Earth gives us constantly? She gives us good water, she gives us sun. Through the trees, we get oxygen, and the oxygen receives CO2 from us so they can grow. The cycle of reciprocity that is everywhere in nature is a gift that has been given by these Metacambe that come from the Wirarika lineage. They know that this medicine is provided to them through Mother Earth, and they continue to teach me how to be more and more reverent of that way of operation. That the same with psilocybin, same with cannabis. Like, these medicines are provided from the Mother Earth, from nature. They're little secrets, right? They're little gifts that I think are planted here, and to be included and invited and welcomed into that lineage and that learning has been just profound in the way that I'm able to show up in the world.
Yeah, well said. The fact that these medicines exist, that they are part of the fabric of this human experience, is nothing short of divine, you know? It's like, thank the creator for just like putting that one in there, putting the peyote buttons inside the
Yes.
mushrooms, and the ayahuasca, and the fact that somebody figured out how to combine two different plants to create the release of the essentially the ayahuasca experience. It's like, how does somebody figure that out from their human intellect? And the answer is they don't, right? It is divination, right? They're guided from the plants themselves to be discovered, or from whatever other higher power that we might ascribe to. And the indigenous cultures that are tuned in to this flow of existence, they should really be blessed and honored. And that's not something that we are so aware of, again, in our Western culture. And with the Murakami and the Wakratka specifically, like, I don't think, and I don't actually fully understand, and I don't think other people who sit with the medicine fully understand what they've gone through to preserve that culture and tradition and ceremony. And so the story I heard is that when the Spaniards came over and were basically taking over Mexico, they had an option. They could sit there and fight, right? So go to war in order to preserve their culture, or they could assimilate, right? So the loss of culture. And instead, they opted out for option number three, which was to flee to the mountains, to like the most inhospitable place in Mexico, so they wouldn't be pursued. And up there, it's like freezing cold at night and scorching hot during the day. And they just made it work. And that's how devoted they were to carrying their culture. And for that, we're so lucky, so like lucky. And this is something that I keep in mind every time I sit in their ceremony with the medicine, which is still like a new practice as of last year, I would say. But to really be in that reverence rather than just going for an experience is super important. And I think that's the delineation that we're talking about here. It's just not a matter of like putting experiences in our back pocket so we could speak about them or whatever else. It's about being inspired by the medicine so that we could create sustainable change and pass on the traditions and the values that are worth persevering through whatever is going to be coming in these times of change.
Beautifully, beautifully said. And I think that it didn't start that way for me. Understanding the history of how it all got to where it is to even allow anybody who says yes to the first one to show up to it. And um, in the similar vein, your prayer that you sent out on our 2019 WhatsApp chat of the prayer that you do for food, it really inspired me and has been a practice I've carried along of before I eat, recognizing and becoming aware of um, the energetic exchange of life sustaining life. And that happens all throughout nature as well. It takes life to sustain life. And I really call in and bless the food. I bless my body and I send a blessing to all of the hands that had a part in preparing it to get to us. You know, we're living in a society where we're so lucky to be able to say, what do I want to eat? And being able to go somewhere and have it prepared for us. We're not in the position to go have to hunt for our food every day, right? And we can choose to grow a garden. It's difficult where I am being in an apartment, but um, you know that takes work and sacrifice as well. So we have the ability to kind of just get what we want. So I do my best to keep in awareness the process of getting these nutrients into my system, water as well. There's a process and hands that have been dedicated to make that happen. And so just like what you're speaking of, the history of how the medicine has been protected and the commitment that and the choice that that tribe had to make to go into harsher territory in order to protect their culture. And I believe they did it because it was their culture was one of love, right? The Spaniards came and wanted war and chaos and domination, and they knew based on their experience with the plants that that's not the way, right? It's the way of love. And so, okay, we're not going to fight you, and we're not going to assimilate to what you are bringing over because it doesn't feel like it's from love. We will go live in harsher territory in order to protect ourselves and to be able to remain in our hearts. And that's what I feel through this medicine. It's they call it the grandfather medicine, and my experience is it is so elderly and wise, right? I think that my hope is that this generation is cultivating wise elders. There are not many to look at in the Western society. And so when I sit with that medicine, it feels very much that way. It feels very soft, very grounded, very strong, just and wise. And the way that it holds myself and many that I've seen in the container is something very special and something to learn from for sure.
Absolutely. And I love the food blessing part for sure, that you're really honoring your nutrition and where it comes from. And there's so much to that. It's almost, again, incomprehensible to fully understand the amount of energy that goes into getting that food to our table from all the hands that are involved, like you suggest, and the literal magic of food being able to grow from the ground. Like I think we would all be better off if we're growing our own food and we're a part of that process, and hunting our own meat and we're a part of that process, and really honoring the natural cycles of life. And like you said, other beings literally die so that we can live.
Mm.
And to be removed from that cycle or ignorant of that cycle or not grateful is really a sin, to miss the mark. So we don't have to attribute too much
Yeah,
religious or association with the word sin, but we're missing the mark.
right.
It's a lack of appreciation for all that we have. And really, in some sense, we've become slaves to our comfort, right? We want everything to be comfortable, and to the extent that it's frowned upon to not be comfortable. Like it's, like, oh, that person doesn't have very much. Like what's going on? How come they don't have more wealth and material goods? But the path to the divine through asceticism is a path that's been long standing. And so, in going with less, we actually access more. We become in to right relation with everything that surrounds us. And again, something that's been demonstrated by these different indigenous cultures. And perhaps this is a good time to transition to your experience with the Sundance.
Yeah, man, that's still a blessing that when I really am able to get quiet and tune in to the fact that I have been accepted into that is overwhelming at times. And so how that came about is at our second summit in 2019, we sat in a temescal in Tulum. And for people who don't know, it's a essentially a hut that's built on the ground. They dig a hole in the middle, and it's through the Native American tradition, and it's like they really honor the four directions. They honor Mother Earth. They honor our guides above. And what they do is they have lava rocks sitting in fire for typically all night. And you go into the hut, you sit around the hole that's dug. They bring in the rocks, and it's essentially a very all natural steam sauna. And there's 4 rounds of that, and you in there. There's songs and prayers for each door, or each direction. They are in reverence of all of it, of the mother, of the father, of the guides above, and the Mother Earth below. And that was a really beautiful experience as well. And not even it's a medicine ceremony. I won't say it's a plant medicine ceremony, but it is a ceremony in and of itself, and it allows you to go really deep because it is a challenging thing. It gets very, very hot, and you are forced to go within and be in the discomfort, like we're talking about, right? It's uncomfortable, and the only way to um, go through that is to accept it, allow it, and to remain open in the chaos of the temescal. So in that temescal, the temescalero that was leading it in for 2 rounds gave me his drum. Now I didn't understand the significance at that point, but I have now come to learn that the drum represents the heartbeat of the community, the heartbeat of the earth, and so it's actually an honor to be given a drum to keep the beat with the songs while everybody is doing their songs and prayers. And that didn't come about till later. So actually, in an ayahuasca ceremony, one of the nights I was dancing, and I just was like something about the Sundance. I had heard a podcast with Aubrey and Porangi, and he talked about the Sundance and his experience. And there was just a little hint, very background of like, I think I would do that. And that planted the seed, right? That was the seed that planted that I didn't know about. It fell on fertile ground and had sunlight and water. So I was like, man, something about the Sundance. And I was sharing that with a FFS sister of ours. Her name's Bree. She was still in contact with the Temescalero that ran our Temescal in Tulum. And she reached out because it is an invite only. It is not something that you can hear about and just show up. It is kind of like an invite only. It is really a marriage. It's a 4-year marriage with whoever brings you in or you bring in, because you are ultimately responsible. As with medicine ceremonies, you're responsible of the energy that you bring into that ceremony, right? And she reached out and said, hey, I have a brother who might be interested in Sundance. He feels called to it. Long story short, we had some back and forth, and there was a time where it was no, I have too much on the table, and there was a time where it was yes, kind of back and forth, and then all of a sudden it was okay, he can come. And this was just over 2 months after that ayahuasca ceremony. And so it happened very fast. It happened very fast. And in the Sundance, you have 2 doors of Temescal in the morning before the sun rises. It's typically 30 to 45 minutes in this lineage that I dance in. Throughout the day, you dance in 4 sections, one for each direction, and then you do your final 2 doors of Temescal directly after the dance. And you do that for 4 days. The invitation is to be fully fasted, so no food and no water. And so my first year was all over the place, right? Going into something like that from being raised in a Western society was totally different. And as they tell you to, there's a tree in the middle that you dance around, and the idea is to just pray. You and the tree become connected, and there's so much going on around. The invitation is let that be what it is, and you focus on your prayer. The first year was difficult to do that. I did get there eventually, but um, yeah, it was an absolute experience. And so I would say last year was my second year. July coming up will be my third. Um, my second year was so much more powerful. The community really felt connected. I really felt accepted. As an outsider, there was some, I think, pushback and some negative energetic forces that were coming my way that I didn't understand because I was an outsider, and had to process that. Right? It goes back to the things that we experience as childs, and I didn't want to not be accepted. That's difficult for me. Luckily, being athletic and being able to be accepted and of value to my community, that is the sports team, I like to be accepted. And this was a challenge in, you're an outsider and you almost have to earn your acceptance. And I believe that I did that. And the second year was much smoother, much more connected with the brothers that I got to dance next to. And so I have a minimum of 4 years, one for each direction, and you must do it 4 years in consecutive order. That way, you are completing your loop. True practitioners of the Sundance do it for, in this lineage, at least 16. I know you mentioned 17 in yours. And so they do each direction in each direction. And that is a 16-year cycle to become a fully fledged sun dancer. So I believe that it feels right to me that I will complete those 16 years in my lifetime. Will it be 16 in a row? We'll see. But it must be a minimum of 4 years in a row to, once you start that cycle, you must complete it. And it's such a deep practice. It's one of the deepest practices of surrender that I have ever experienced, because you are so depleted of the natural resources that you're used to or accustomed to having. And so there's so much discomfort in the temescal. You sweat, you dance in the sun, and you don't really have the ability to replenish those nutrients and that energy. It really does come from spirit. You are filled with energy and spirit in that dance, and you surrender and you feed yourself with that. So it's been one of the most profound practices alongside these plant medicine journeys that I've ever been able to experience.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. And again, some things to highlight. It's in this particular ceremony, rather than adding something exogenous like we're used to with plant medicine ceremonies, we're actually removing things. So we're removing the water, we're removing the food, and on some level, we're removing sleep as well. And people are pretty sleep deprived from what I saw. To give some context, I went to my first Sundance last year and was serving as a firekeeper. And so there were quite a few firekeepers. I think there were maybe 14 to 16 of us, and the fire burns the entire time, so we have to take care of it. And I would wake up at 1 a.m. to go and be with the fire and take care of it. And then eventually we would put all the rocks in for the temescal, or the purification lodge, as we call it. And then the rocks would have to heat up for 3 hours. And then the dancers would get woken up at 5 a.m., come out, have their sweats. And during that time, we had 8 little purification lodges. So it's like kind of chaotic as people are going in and out for the rounds, and people are carrying these smoking hot rocks to the different purification lodges, and it's like chaos, and we're trying not to run into each other and drop stones. If you drop a stone, it has to go back in the fire to be purified
Yes.
again. And this fire is so big and raging hot that we're pulling out these rocks with a pitchfork, and it's burning. It's like burning my skin, and you're just in it, and it has to be done. That's part of the discomfort. That's part of the service, and it's only a fraction of the discomfort to what the dancers are experiencing, because they wake up, the sun's not even up, they go in, they sweat, and then after they sweat, when they have no fluids in their system, they go into the arbor and dance around the tree, freezing cold. Finally, the sun rises, it's scorching hot. They dance all day for 12 hours, and then they come out and sweat again. And it's like, what is going on? Like how are these men and women
uh,
persevering through this? Like, it's full on. And that's what I'm talking about in the sense of devotion. And we don't see that in our modern world. We don't see that level of devotion. And everybody else that supported, all the people that cooked all day long fortunately, like, the kitchen area is far enough away from the arbor where the dances are, so the dancers don't smell the food because they're
you're
fasting.
right.
And it's not just a 4-day process of that ceremony, but there's ceremony around the ceremony. And so I was there for 10 days, and it's a huge effort. There was probably 100 people in total that were there for the whole time, contributing in different ways. And everybody was bringing something, everybody was contributing something. And that's something that I wanted to touch on as well. You speak about feeling validated through your ability to be an athlete and bring something to the table. And so that's one way that you were validated. And we have this modern idea that, don't worry, sweetie, you're perfect as you are. And it's
Mm,
like, yes, on some level, yes. And also, how are you serving, right? How are you serving? What are you bringing to the table? And that doesn't, that gets really loaded and twisted around quickly as we think about our shortcomings and comparison and everything else. But the point is that we all have ways that we could contribute. So there was people cooking, there was people tending the fire, there was people banging the drum, the singers. Maybe somebody's a singer, not everybody's a hunter, not everybody's a dancer, but we could all find our ways to be of service, and collectively we're making something really magical happen.
mm,
And so the slogan at that particular Sundance was for the people. We're doing this for the people. So when people are like, why would you go and put yourself through that? Well, it's an initiation, it's a rite of passage, and it's also of service. There's something more vast and energetic and metaphysical that is transpiring in that ceremony, because people are there for not only their own prayers and healing, but for the healing of others, and also the healing of the collective and the healing of the earth. Right? There is an overall intention of betterment in a return to harmony, in a return to balance in this world, so that we could carry forward collectively as a species. But beyond that identification of separation as a species, it's like everything carries on. We want everything to carry on in harmony. And to see that, to just see how people were in it and what they were willing to do, right, for that greater purpose, was so inspiring. And so I think we could really punctuate that point by speaking a little bit about the piercing. And we won't dive into it too deep. We'll leave some things to the imagination. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the piercing?
yeah. Really quick, if I can, the slogan that we dance for is so that we may live. And a big part of the ceremony is creating 52 prayers that all of the dancers, the fire keepers, the the cooks, the people supporting the support group, is we all get to tie our prayers to the tree that goes in the middle of the arena that we dance in. And this is on a secluded mountain in Mexico. So the views are just mountain ranges as far as you can see. It's wonderful. And in the dancing, I don't know if you're so focused on your physical um, discomfort or situation, it becomes very difficult. So it is the surrender to the prayer, right? And there is room, because it's 4 days, there is room to pray for yourself. We should also give ourselves prayer. And there's a lot of room, and most of the prayer goes to Mother Earth, to communities, to humans, to animals, to insects, to plants, to it really brings in everything. And your prayer is for the cycle that is life, everything that works together. There are thousands of things, right, that happen in each moment that allow us just to take this next breath. And nothing None of that happens with anything we have to do consciously. I don't revolve the sun around our earth and the moon. I don't have to consciously think about keeping gravity. None of Same with like a heartbeat. I don't have to think every couple seconds to pump my own heart, right? There's this energy, there's this thing that is present in life that allows life to be maintained, and none of it happens from our conscious awareness. It happens for us, which allows us the freedom to be in prayer and community and communion and reverence of it. And I think that's so beautiful. The piercing, yeah, and you said initiation. It's hands down the biggest initiation I have ever been through. The Sundance being that it's something I think a lot of people talk about, the missing of the initiation in Western society. I'm currently listening to the book Iron John, and it talks a lot
Mm.
about that the initiation for young men to know you are now becoming a man, right? And these are the responsibilities that are bestowed upon you as such. There is not that in our Western society. It's you turn 18, you get a driver's license, and you can buy cigarettes, and you turn 21 and you can hit a bar. Go figure it out, right? It's almost to where college has been told or sold to us that it's the initiation, and it's not that hard thing. Yes, college creates commitment and consistency, um, but it is not that thing where you're, in the book Iron John, it talks a lot about removing the child from the mother. And I heard a quote recently that the mother brings a baby to a boy, but the men bring the boy to a man, and they are secluded from that loving safety that a mother brings, and they're taken to isolation with the men. Now, this mountain also offers like spiritual retreats where you sit on the mountain with only the clothes on your back for 4 days and you pray. You create a one little circle around yourself and you sit on this mountain and you pray, and that's it. You don't have covering. You don't. There are people there that you can kind of hear, but they don't interact with you. You're on your journey to listen, and you fast and you pray, and it's something that I'm definitely going to partake in at some point.
And so
Um,
this would be a vision
that was
quest for those listening.
exactly, exactly a vision quest. Yeah, where you fast and you just sit in and with nature. And I think the touching on something you said previous, how did we know to mix the chacruna leaf with the vine to make ayahuasca? It was the quietness, it was the unbusyness of the mind that allowed them to listen to the magic and wisdom of nature. Right, they were guided to it, divination, as you said. And so um, the dance is one thing because there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of movement, and in all of that chaos, can we still be in prayer and in reverence? And I think that's the difficult part about the Western society. It's always go, go, go. It's do more, be more, create more, make more, buy more. It's how can we teach people to practice the groundedness and peace in the chaos, right? I call it the temescal of life, or the temescal of emotions. When emotions are high and everybody's rah or fighting or yelling, like, can we find that groundedness, that sense of peace in the chaos? Can we be in the middle of a raging firestorm and go, for just a moment, thank you for this warmth, even when it's burning us?
Mm.
Right, that is what I think masters are pointing to, and I'm not there yet, but I have this thread that I feel called to work to. And so, in the dance, there are offerings and piercings. So, you essentially take a piece of wood, you whittle it down. I prefer by my own efforts, not everybody does it, to create a stake. I like to explain it as a swollen toothpick. And you deem what day and what door you would like to offer. Each of them have their own representations and meanings. You choose your chest, your shoulders, or your back. And there are typically four ways that people offer. Um, Without going into too much detail, the point is to have these stakes released from the piece of skin that holds it in. And so I think a lot of people used to put little needles through the skin of their finger, right? Like you'd get a little sewing needle and you'd kind of just dig it through, and it's wrapped with this little piece of skin, and you'd kind of pull it off, right? I did that as a kid. I think most people would understand that reference. This is a little bit deeper. So there's thicker skin around the spike, the stake, and the idea is to have it ripped from your body. And the representation of that is a release. It's to release what no longer serves you. It's to look at the idea of physical pain and still say yes and show up, right? It's the saying yes to the hard thing. And it's also for me an offering back to the earth, right? Like there's typically a little bit of blood that will drip, and my intention is when my time comes to leave this earth, I really pray that my body can be put in the earth, because I want my nutrients of my body to be the fertilizer for the growth of the new, right? If my body can be fertilizer for grass to grow, then the grass grows, and then the buffalo eats the grass, and then we cultivate the buffalo to give us nutrients. And so it completes the cycle of reciprocity. So for part of my prayer was in this moment a small offering of myself back to Mother Earth for everything that she gives us, the food, the water, the air, all of it. And the abuelo that gave me the steaks told me that these steaks are made with love. If you remember your mother and you remember your father and you offer yourself with love, you will feel no pain. And when you're seeing these offerings, they can be intense, right? And from the outside view, it's like, wow, I don't know. I don't know about that. But I kept what the abuelo taught me to heart. And I was just in my heart space when I was getting those steaks prepared in my body. And during my um, offering, it was just in the heart space of love and gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to my community. Thank you to my past. Thank you to the earth. Thank you to um, the spirit. Thank you to all of it. Just thank you. And so far, probably the most mind blowing experience I've had is that when those released from my body, there was no pain. Um, they end up giving you the steaks as well. I felt no pain in the weeks after that it was healing. There was no pain. And so what he said was right. What he taught me was right. If we can operate from a space of love, even in the hard physical and mental and emotional and spiritually challenging times, we can find peace. We can find no pain, even if it's for a moment. And that was my experience with the offering. Um, it's something that I thought I would do only on my fourth year, my graduation year. In this lineage, it's kind of open on your first year, and they do say it's a choice. However, because of the impact of it, if you're not offering, the dancers will kind of be like, "Hey, man, like, are you gonna offer? Like, what's going on?" And I didn't understand until I offered, and it was such a beautiful release and an experience. And the way that I did it was I ran into the arms of people in that community that are supporting me. And so as I was released from the stakes, from the things that I no longer wanted to hold on to, I was fully embraced with so much love and acceptance from the community and the dancers who understood what I was doing. And something that's always stuck out to me is in the offering, nobody says congratulations, right? Nobody says congratulations. When we go through initiations, or let's say we up level and sell our business and we do all these things, everybody's like, oh, congratulations, you did it. That's awesome. Nobody says congratulations when you do your offering. Everybody says thank you, because they understand the work you're doing, not only for yourself, but for the collective. And that has always resonated so deep in me of, wow, nobody says congratulations. It's not about me. It's about what we're doing. And so everybody just says thank you. And then to be witness to and to be in support of anybody else in that community that I've connected with during their offerings would bring me to tears every single time. It heightened the understanding and experience of that part of the dance in a really big way.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful depiction, and I'm so grateful you included that part about being centered in peace and remembering your mother and your father, and not feeling pain. And that's it. That's what we could carry, like you say, through all of life and all of these challenging times. And in that sense, we're always supported in that connection. And so as we deepen our connection to all my relations, that is the grace that can be bestowed upon us. And it's not a matter of worthiness, as we touch on that again. It just is. It's just there. But we have to be willing to open to it and be willing to make certain sacrifices. And the sacrifice doesn't need to be a Sundance. The sacrifice could be praying and meditating twice a day, or getting out in nature at a sit spot, or letting go of some of these material goods that feed our desire. And as we create space for the divine will come in.
Mm,
And so, one thing I wanted to include for context for people who might hear this and be inspired to go and Sundance, it's not like a ayahuasca retreat where you just sign up and you go. And it's typically challenging to find your way in. And it's not just like open arms. I would say all are welcome in the sense that, depending on the tradition and the lineage and the family, all are welcome in that it's not about like race. Everybody's welcome in that sense. For those traditions who have been able to get past the history of colonialism and be a little more
mhm,
welcoming, right? And that's something that we're all working through and we should be. But it is devotion to a way of life. So you're not just going to go and sign up and do this thing. You're committing to a way of life moving forward, essentially indefinitely. And that's what Ronnie's speaking about here. You know, he signed up for the minimum commitment of 4 years, and typically you have to be of service to the Sundance before you could even dance. So I would say your experience is pretty unique in that sense. And all of this to paint a greater idea and to plant seeds of devotion for those who
mm,
want to walk in a good way. And there are so many ways to do that, so many different traditions and belief systems, and all of them include recognizing the collective magic that we are a part of and really being of service to that. As we kind of wrap up here, do you have anything else you want to add or include or touch on?
yeah, thank you for that description of it. It even in this moment is teaching me a deeper sense and level, and bringing in almost to tears, a level of gratitude of of just how things worked out for me to be where I am and to be included in these plant medicine ceremonies and these practices and the Sundance. So thank you so much for that, because it is, yeah, it doesn't have to be a Sundance. Initiations come in many different forms, and the opportunities to say yes to the hard things, no matter how they manifest in our lives, is the initiation for us. It could come in relationship, it could come in business, but we also have to be open and aware to how those initiations are showing up. And I had no idea 3 years ago when I listened to that podcast that it's actually something I would be able to do. But I kept showing up to my own work, right? I kept saying yes to um, continue to go deep inside. And like you said, making space for grace, making space for spirit to operate in a way that we can't see yet, but being in faith and in peace that it is for me. Um, and then there's just different levels. And so I just want to piggyback on that and encourage people to just become aware. That's really the first part. You don't even have to go sit in plant medicine. You don't even have to meditate. It's just the awareness of what is in front of me, what is the opportunity in front of me, trying to teach me, and can I come to that from a better place inside of myself instead of so reactionary to what it is, to just take a moment, like you said, go in nature, take a walk, sit in some meditation if that's what feels good, and just open to become aware of the invitation that is in front of us. And I get invitations in many ways, right? Not just the ceremonies, Sundance and plant medicine, but in business, in life, in relationship. And so continuing this work is special, and I'm very grateful to be a part of it and to um, inspire anybody and to be able to share a message coming from a place of somebody who wasn't born in these types of lineages and wasn't really acclimated to them only since 2019. And sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago, right? 2019 sometimes feels like a lifetime ago. And there are moments though when I go, man, it's only been 4 years. if I continue to say yes and remain open, what can happen in 5 and 10 and 15? Where can, like, how beautiful it can go if it's without attachment that it's going to continue to go in the trajectory that it is, but with an openness that it also can, and just continuing to show up and go, wow, wow. Like, we don't have to be. I was in a men's group a couple weekends ago and we were talking about magic, and he was like, how? I said, maybe not how, but what about wow? We don't have to figure it out, right? We don't have to figure it. How did this? I don't know. But can you go, wow, look at all of, wow. And that reverence for that thing, like you said, creates more room for it to continue to come in. If I have to figure it all out, that's not my capacity. I'm not here to figure it all out. I'm here to be in awe of it and just continue to say yes and show up. And um, I just hope that that resonates with people and allows them to, just even for a moment, right? Because that's how it starts. It starts in a moment, and then it can build on itself. We build that muscle of awareness. So I just hope that people can take a step back and, instead of going how or why, go wow, wow.
I love that. And what a great way to wrap this up. And so let that be a reminder to our listeners to approach every day with curiosity and wonder, and to open up to the wow that we're all a part of. Thank you so much,
Yes,
brother.
aho, brother. Thank you.
Aho. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment, and perhaps sharing with others. And if you are curious about some of the services I offer, you can check out my website, connectionintegration.com. You'll see on there that I offer one-on-one support and guidance based around spiritual and mental wellness. I also offer nature connection experiences and plant medicine retreats throughout the year. Until next time, wishing you much curiosity, wonder, and peace as you open yourself up to the wild tameless. Be well.